All right, this is the 4 things you need to do to make your next septic call much less expensive. Number 1, you can see it there, anybody that's seen my videos, is you need to know where your tanks are. Now, since my septic system has been exposing itself to myself over many years, I know exactly where my tanks are. But you might have bought your house 15 years ago and you might have bought it from somebody else. If you don't know where your tanks are and your toilets are backing up, try and find any documentation you can find that says where they are. If you happen to know the old owner, call them. Because when somebody comes out to do work on your septic system, there is a fixed cost for a fixed amount of time. And you want to get to the core of the problem. You don't want them to spend their time digging through your yard, and I've seen it take hours just to find your septic system before they can even get started. So number 1, find out where your tanks are. Number 2, open your lids. When the septic professional comes to your house, you want them to walk in and see this. The lids are open. Why is that? Because if they can just walk right over and look in, they can start their diagnosis much faster. Step number 3, pump your tanks. If we take my discharge tank, and with most of us, the discharge tank is where the backup occurs. Right now we can see the levels are down to normal. But as you see in any of my videos, you know that this tank is backed up. This is something that has cost me hundreds of dollars. Manually pump this tank. If the septic professional shows up and that tank is completely flooded, they can't look in to see what might be causing it. Certainly they can do some other diagnostics, but if this tank were low, they could look right in and see what's wrong, even if you don't know how your system works. Now, I recommend 2 different ways of pumping, and there's other videos on my site that show it. One is the sump pump method. Again, this is the sump pump I've settled on that has done an amazing job over dozens of pumps over the last 5 years. That's one method. But if your pump is actually working inside your tank, then you will use the manual switch method. Again, I have a video on that, but just to show that to you briefly. The second method to pump, look for my video on this, and this was very relevant to me. Since the float valve, the float gauge was broken, it meant that the motor inside of the discharge tank was still working. It just wouldn't kick off, and that is to manually turn on the discharge. What I had to do was turn this on for 15 minutes twice a day. And this is before the septic people could come out to manually pump that tank so it wasn't overflowing. Again, I have a full video on how to use this. The 4th way you will save money on your next septic call is to give them good symptoms. So if you properly describe the symptoms of how your system's failing, your toilets are backing up, you get runoff of one of these tanks. If you can describe that symptom to the company before they come out, they sometimes will bring a different set of tools. And that means that you're more likely to get it fixed in just that moment. For example, at one time I had it so it appeared like that pump right there wasn't working. So there was a symptom that indicated that, and that meant that they showed up at my house with a pump. That saves them money, that saves me time and me money. So give good symptoms. All right, in brief summary, let's look at the 4. Number 1, find your tanks. Number 2, open the tanks. If they can just show up on site and look right in and get closer to solving the problem, that's what you want to do. Number 3, if you have the capacity, pump your tanks. This one has actually cost me hundreds, because what happens is if one of the tanks is so full that they can't even look into it and they suspect the break's in there, you have to pay to have them come out and pump your tank just so they can see where the problem is. If you have the ability, pump your tanks. And number 4, watch your symptoms as they're reported by your family and try and be succinct and clear on what the symptoms are, as that will help you give a better description, and it might change their approach on what they bring out, and they can solve the problem quicker.